The Resurrection Stone. The one Hallow Dumbledore wanted not as a scholar, but as a grieving brother. Summer of 1996. A ruined shack in Little Hangleton, barely standing among overgrown nettles. Dumbledore steps inside alone, beneath rotting boards, hidden under layers of curses that would kill most wizards on contact. A small gold ring set with a cracked black stone. He disarms every trap, and then, for the first time in decades, does something profoundly foolish. He puts the ring on. The curse hit instantly. Not like fire, like death itself wrapping around his fingers and climbing. Within seconds, his right hand was blackened, dead, as if aged 1,000 years in a single breath. Snape's account was blunt. The curse was meant to kill within minutes. That Dumbledore managed to apparate back to Hogwarts is itself extraordinary. Snape contained the damage in the hand, sealed it like a dam holding back a black river, but made no promises. A year, perhaps less. The Gaunts had worn that ring for generations, proudly, obsessively, while living in squalor with a dead snake nailed to the door. They believed the engraved symbol was the Peveril coat of arms. They had no idea they were carrying a deathly Hallow. Voldemort, who took it after murdering his father's family, saw only a trophy of lineage. Dumbledore was the first person in centuries to understand exactly what it was. And that is why he could not resist. The stone was the Resurrection Stone. In that moment, the greatest wizard of the age wasn't thinking about Voldemort. He was thinking about Ariana, about his mother, about whether he could see them one more time and say what he never said. The Ministry's internal report on cursed artifacts from that year lists a spike in seizures across Britain. No mention of the ring. Dumbledore never reported it. He destroyed the Horcrux with the sword of Gryffindor, kept the stone, and told almost no one. The official story at Hogwarts was a vague injury, McGonagall asked once, received silence, and never asked again. Voldemort placed the curse on that ring to guard a fragment of his soul. Dumbledore triggered it because he could not stop reaching for the souls of others. One hoarded life. The other could not let go of the dead. But here is what changes everything. From that night forward, every decision Dumbledore made, recruiting Slughorn, the lessons with Harry, the cave, the arrangement with Snape, was the work of a man who already knew when he would die. How many people in that castle realized that every kind word from the headmaster that year was also a farewell? He did not wear the ring out of arrogance. He wore it out of love. And that love cost him everything he had left. Now, that blackened hand rested on many things during that final year, including a strange silver instrument on his desk that, once activated, behaved in a way no one fully understood. A thin column of smoke rose from the instrument on Dumbledore's desk, and it answered a question he had carried for 14 years. The night Arthur Weasley was attacked in the Department of Mysteries, Harry was pulled from the headmaster's office trembling, still tasting venom that was not his own. Before anyone followed the boy out, Dumbledore turned to the delicate silver device on his table, spindly, clicking faintly, and tapped it with his wand. A serpent of smoke uncoiled from its tip. "But in essence divided?" he murmured. The serpent split into two. That line is one of the most devastating moments in the series, and most viewers walked right past it. Dumbledore was not asking about the snake. He was asking about Harry, whether Voldemort's soul fragment inside the boy remained separate from Harry's own. Two souls, one body. The instrument confirmed they were divided, not merged. Harry was still himself. Hogwarts inventory records from 1978 list the device only as Silver Respiratory Class Diagnostic, Provenance Unknown, Soul Adjacent Function, Restricted. That classification is revealing. Soul adjacent is a term the Department of Mysteries reserves for objects that interact with the boundary between living magic and something deeper. Fewer than a dozen items in Britain carry that label. Dumbledore kept his between a sneakoscope and a dish of sherbet lemons, a device that reads the architecture of a human soul, sitting next to candy. What makes the moment chilling is not the result. It is the speed. No hesitation. No book consulted. Dumbledore already knew which device to reach for, which question to ask, and what the two-snake answer meant. This was not discovery. It was confirmation. He had suspected since Godric's Hollow, since Hagrid placed a scarred infant in his arms whose magical signature pulsed in two rhythms, like a heartbeat carrying an echo that did not belong to it. In medieval alchemical tradition, detecting a foreign essence within a living body was called reading the double flame. Paracelsus wrote that the true horror was never possession. It was that the host might not notice. Dumbledore noticed before Harry could walk. How many nights did he return to that instrument, tapping it gently, watching the same two serpents divide, hoping just once to see a third possibility? A sign that the fragment could leave without taking the boy with it? He never saw one. And then Snape asked what no viewer forgets. "You have been raising him like a pig for slaughter?" Dumbledore's eyes filled with tears. But consider what the silver instrument proves. You do not spend years calibrating a soul diagnostic for a child you have already decided to sacrifice. You build it because you are searching, desperately, for evidence that the parasite can be separated without killing the host. But here is the full weight of that office. The instrument could detect a Horcrux inside a living boy. It could not destroy one. And resting in a glass case barely 3 feet behind it, sat an object that already had a blade that killed a piece of Voldemort's soul years earlier and still carried the venom to do it again. A sword that learns. That is not poetry. That is goblin metallurgy. The Sword of Gryffindor was forged by Ragnarok I over 1,000 years ago, and unlike any human-made blade, it absorbs what it encounters. Every substance that should destroy it instead becomes part of its edge. In 1993, when 12-year-old Harry Potter drove it through the roof of a basilisk's mouth, the steel drank the venom. Not a coating, not a residue. The metal itself became permanently toxic. And Dumbledore kept it in a glass case behind the desk where he offered students lemon drops. Goblin-wrought silver has no human equivalent. Medieval alchemists spent centuries pursuing what they called living metal, a substance that adapts and evolves through contact. Goblin smiths achieved it before the founders of Hogwarts were born. The sword never dulls, it never corrodes, and after the Chamber of Secrets, it never stopped being one of the most lethal objects in Britain. Basilisk venom is one of only 2 substances capable of destroying a Horcrux. The other, fiendfire, is nearly impossible to control. After 1993, Dumbledore possessed a portable, reusable, perfectly stable source of the first. The Ministry's internal catalog of Hogwarts artifacts, last revised in 1996, listed the Sword of Gryffindor as historical relic, ceremonial significance, no active magical threat. Either nobody at the Ministry understood what Goblin Silver does, or someone ensured they did not. Consider what Dumbledore was quietly assembling. He had identified most of Voldemort's Horcruxes. He possessed the only weapon that could destroy them without unleashing hellfire, and he told almost no one. When the curse of Marvolo Gaunt's ring left him dying, his plan for the sword survived him. It reached Neville Longbottom through the Sorting Hat itself, as though Gryffindor's legacy chose its own final moment. Neville did not know what the blade carried. He swung, and Nagini, Voldemort's last anchor to immortality, fell in a single stroke. Did anyone ever tell him what made that swing lethal? That he held a 1,000-year-old goblin blade soaked in venom no living wizard could replicate? Griphook believed the sword was stolen. He was not entirely wrong. Goblins hold that the maker is the eternal owner. Humans hold that a gift belongs to the receiver forever. The sword spent a millennium caught between 2 definitions of justice, and still found time to end a war. But here is what stays with you. Dumbledore kept this weapon, saturated in basilisk venom, on a shelf in a school full of children, beside instruments sensitive enough to detect a soul fragment inside a sleeping boy. He trusted it would be needed before the end. Not by him. By someone brave enough to reach for it without asking what it carried. He was right. He did not live to see it. Not every object in that office was made to destroy. One was made to tempt. And even Dumbledore, a man who refused the highest seat in the wizarding world, never dared wear it a second time. Dragons do not forgive, not even after death. In the winter of 1958, a parcel arrived at Hogwarts wrapped in 3 layers of Hungarian iron cloth. No return address, no letter, only a velvet box, and inside it, a ring carved from a single fang of a Romanian longhorn, polished to the color of old bone, with runes so fine they could only be read under wand light. Dumbledore opened it alone at midnight. The portraits later said the candles dimmed the moment his fingers touched it. The Dragon Fang ring belongs to a tradition most modern wizards have never heard of. In the 13th century, Transylvanian dragonologists discovered that the fang of a dragon that died in rage retained a residue of magical fury, raw, undirected, immense. Romanian wandmakers called it the breath that stayed behind. A fang harvested within hours of such a death could be shaped into a conductor of staggering power. Not a wand, something worse. A dragon fang ring does not channel the wearer's magic. It amplifies it. Every spell cast while wearing one carries roughly 3 times its normal force. Healing charms overwhelm, shields become walls, and offensive magic becomes something no classroom ever prepared anyone for. The International Confederation of Wizards classified Dragon Fang artifacts as Category 4 restricted objects in 1761, after a Polish witch named Elżbieta Kroll wore one during a duel and accidentally leveled a church, a courthouse, and 40 meters of city wall in Krakow. The official report blamed an earthquake. The sealed Confederation file contains a single annotation in the margin. No further production to be permitted. So how did one end up in Dumbledore's office? Elphias Doge, in a private letter to Aberforth, written decades later, referenced that dreadful Tuesday when Albus tested the ring and went very quiet for a long time afterward. No record of what spell he cast, no mention of damage, only silence, and the fact that Dumbledore removed it, placed it on the highest shelf of his cabinet, and never spoke of it again. And this is where the real weight of the story settles. The ring did not malfunction. It did not curse him. It did not betray him. It worked perfectly, and that was exactly the problem. Dumbledore had spent decades after Ariana's death building a life defined by restraint. He refused the minister's seat. He chose to teach rather than to rule. The Dragonfang ring showed him what his magic could truly do if he ever stopped holding back. And he understood, with the clarity of a man who had already lost everything once, that he must never look again. But he kept it, did not destroy it, did not send it to the Department of Mysteries. He placed it on a shelf in an office where students came for tea and sherbet lemons, as if the truest form of safety was not in hiding from what frightened you, but in choosing to sit beside it every single day and still say no. The ring is still there, unpolished, patient. Not every danger in that office announced itself with curses and dark auras. Some hid in plain sight, small enough to overlook, sharp enough to draw blood, like a single needle resting among a dozen innocent silver instruments. A needle does not need venom to be deadly. It only needs to carry the right curse in the right hands. Among the dozens of delicate silver instruments that lined the shelves of Dumbledore's office, spinning, puffing, clicking in rhythms only he understood, there sat one object so small that most visitors never registered it at all. A thin needle, no longer than an index finger, resting on a shallow dish of tarnished copper. It did not move. It did not glow. It simply waited. The object was catalogued in the Hogwarts Restricted Inventory of 1973 as a binding needle of unknown provenance, Class 4 danger rating. Class 4 meant the artifact could not be safely destroyed by any conventional means. It also meant the Ministry preferred not to store it themselves. This is a pattern worth noticing. When the Ministry classified something as too dangerous to keep in its own vaults, it often ended up in the possession of one man. In medieval magical tradition, binding needles served a purpose that modern wizards find deeply uncomfortable. A single prick could tether the victim's magic to the needle itself, not draining it, but anchoring it, so that every spell the victim cast would echo back through the needle to whoever held it. Real-world folk magic across Europe used pins and needles in sympathetic rituals for centuries, and the magical world's version was, predictably, far worse. The victim would feel nothing. They would never know their magic had a second listener. Severus Snape reportedly noticed the needle during a private meeting in 1996 and paused mid-sentence. Dumbledore said nothing. Snape did not ask. There are conversations between those two men that existed entirely in silence, and this may have been one of the most loaded. The Department of Mysteries requested the needle 3 separate times between 1981 and 1995. Each request was personally declined by Dumbledore, with responses so polite they bordered on dismissive. The third refusal allegedly consisted of a single line: "I believe it is safer where fewer people know what it does." And this is where the weight of this object becomes clear. Dumbledore did not keep the needle because he intended to use it. He kept it because he understood what it meant if anyone else did. A headmaster's office filled with whirring distractions was the perfect hiding place. Not a vault, not a warning, just a small sharp thing lost among the harmless noise. The most dangerous objects are not the ones locked behind enchantments. They are the ones no one thinks to look at twice. But some objects in that office were not hidden at all. They were kept in full view precisely because Dumbledore needed them close, needed them ready, needed them for the one war only he could see coming back. A single memory. That is all that stood between Lord Voldemort and genuine immortality. Not a spell, not a weapon, but one old professor's shame poured into a shallow stone basin. The pensive sat on Dumbledore's desk during Harry's 6th year, like something ordinary. A wide bowl of carved stone, runes circling its rim, filled with a substance neither liquid nor gas, silver white, slowly turning. Inside that basin lived the most dangerous piece of intelligence in the wizarding world. Dumbledore had spent decades collecting other people's memories, anyone who had crossed paths with Tom Riddle before he vanished into darkness. He assembled a portrait of the young Voldemort no one else had the patience to build. The Department of Mysteries catalogued over 200 pensives across Britain by the mid-20th century. None were used the way Dumbledore used his, as a war room disguised as furniture. The critical memory belonged to Horace Slughorn. One evening, a teenage Tom Riddle sat in Slughorn's office after a Slug Club dinner and asked what would happen if a wizard split his soul, not once, but 7 times. Slughorn answered, because the boy was charming, the question seemed academic, and teachers sometimes confuse curiosity with innocence. That conversation gave Voldemort the blueprint for his immortality. Slughorn knew it for 50 years. He altered the memory he eventually gave Dumbledore, smothering the key detail in fog, because the truth was unbearable. He had handed the most dangerous wizard in history the formula that made him nearly unkillable. Did Slughorn ever count how many lives that silence cost? Without the real memory, Dumbledore could suspect Horcruxes existed but not confirm the number. In a war against fragmented immortality, the difference between several and exactly 7 was the difference between strategy and guesswork. In medieval alchemy, 7 was the number of spiritual completion. Riddle did not choose it by accident. But here is what most people overlook. Dumbledore did not force Slughorn to confess. He sent a 16-year-old boy. not because Harry was expendable, because Dumbledore understood that shame does not yield to authority, it yields to sincerity. Tom Riddle once sat in that same office and used charm to extract a secret. Harry Potter sat in the same chair and used honesty to undo the damage. Same man, same question at the heart of it, opposite purposes entirely. One memory, one honest request, one man's decision to stop hiding. The key to killing Lord Voldemort was never locked in a vault or guarded by dragons. It sat in a stone bowl on a headmaster's desk, waiting for someone brave enough to ask. And yet the pensive was not the only object on that desk with a history written in blood. Resting nearby, as though it were just another antique, sat a wand that had changed hands more violently than any dark wizard ever managed on their own. The Elder Wand did not need a master. It needed a victim. 15 inches elderwood, thestral tail hair core, and if you had walked into Dumbledore's office on any ordinary Tuesday, you would have seen it lying across his desk beside a half-eaten sherbet lemon, catching the afternoon light as though it were nothing more than an old man's walking stick. No case, no ward, no warning label, just the most lethal magical object ever crafted, resting on polished mahogany. The wand's history reads less like a lineage and more like an autopsy report. Antioch Peveril, its first known owner, had his throat cut in his sleep the same night he boasted of its power. From there, the trail is a catalogue of violence spanning 7 centuries. Emeric the Evil, Egbert the Egregious, Godolo, who was locked in a cellar by his own son, Loxias, whose killer's identity remains unknown to this day, which means the wand changed hands so violently that even the winner did not want to be remembered. Ollivander once described it in private correspondence to a colleague in Prague as the only wand that actively selects for ambition and punishes loyalty. Every wand maker since the 15th century has known this. Not one of them has said it publicly. The official position of the wand-making guild has always been that the Elder Wand is a fairy tale, a position they maintained even while their own records documented at least 17 confirmed kills attributed to disputes over its ownership. In medieval Europe, there was a concept called the Blood Crown, a throne so coveted that no king who wore it died of natural causes. The Elder Wand operated on exactly this principle. Possession was not power. Possession was a countdown. And then Albus Dumbledore won it in 1945 and did something no owner had done in its entire existence. He stopped hiding it. He used it every day, openly, in front of students, colleagues, and enemies. And no one recognized it. Not because it was disguised, because no one believed the greatest wizard alive would carry the most dangerous wand in history without protection, without secrecy, without fear. Why would he? What kind of man advertises a death sentence? The kind who has already accepted it. Dumbledore did not keep the Elder Wand because he trusted it. He kept it because he did not trust anyone else to carry the curse of owning it. Every year he held it was a year no one else died for it. And when the time came, he arranged his own death so precisely that the wand's bloody chain of succession would end not with a murder, but with a quiet fall from a tower on a summer night. The deadliest wand in history finally met the one owner it could not outlive, because he chose to die on his own terms before it got the chance. Of course, the wand was not the only thing in that office keeping watch. The portraits lining those walls had been listening, remembering, and reporting for far longer than most realized, and not all of them answered only to the headmaster sitting in the chair. Portraits. Most wizards hang them for memory. Dumbledore hung his for intelligence. Step into the headmaster's office past midnight, sometime in 1995. Fawkes sleeps with his head beneath a wing. Along every wall, gilded frames hold former headmasters who appear to doze, but their eyes move. The moment Arthur Weasley was attacked by Nagini inside the Ministry, Dumbledore did not send an owl. He turned to the wall. Within seconds, Everard, whose portrait also hung in the ministry, confirmed the attack. Dilys Derwent, displayed in both the office and St. Mungo's, tracked Arthur's arrival at the ward. 2 painted figures accomplished what would have taken the order an hour. This was not improvisation. This was infrastructure. A headmaster's portrait is not merely a moving painting. It carries memory, temperament, and judgment, pressed into pigment through a process 17th century theorists compared to distilling a soul's echo into canvas. And the detail most overlook, loyalty is not automatic. It must be earned. When Umbridge seized the office, not a single frame cooperated. They snored with theatrical commitment every time she walked in. Phineas Nigellus Black kept a second portrait at Grimmauld Place, giving Dumbledore a direct line into Order headquarters. A ministry review from 1978 noted that certain Hogwarts portraits occupy frames in no fewer than 14 governmental offices, with no record of who authorized their installation. The review recommended removal. The recommendation was quietly buried. The file does not record by whom. But the true power of this network showed itself after Dumbledore died. It did not collapse. It transferred. His own portrait now hung behind the headmaster's chair, and through it he guided Snape through the most dangerous double role in Order history. Every instruction for protecting students under the Carrows, every timing detail for the Sword of Gryffindor, passed through painted lips, from a man who had planned for his own death the way others plan for a holiday. And this is where the weight settles. He built the finest listening network in the wizarding world. Ministry, hospital, school, safe house, all monitored from one room, and still chose not to tell Harry the full truth until it was nearly too late. Not because the tools failed him, because some truths cannot travel through a frame on a wall. The most connected wizard in Britain died with conversations unfinished. That office held 8 objects of extraordinary power, but the most dangerous thing in it was never on a shelf. It was the man behind the desk, carrying more than anyone should, making choices that saved a world and broke a boy in the same breath. Every portrait served him. Not one could tell him when enough was enough. Thank you for watching. You know what genuinely surprises me about all of this? We just walked through 8 objects that could kill, corrupt, spy, or destroy. And every one of them sat in a room where children were regularly invited for sherbet lemons and conversation. That is not carelessness. Dumbledore understood something most people never have to learn. You do not lock away the things that frighten you. You keep them where you can reach them before anyone else does. A curse sealed in a vault is still a curse. You have simply given yourself the comfort of not looking at it. Every object in that office was a decision he had already made, or one he knew was coming. The ring was what love costs. The wand was what power takes. The memories were what still had to be done. That office was never a sanctuary. It was a man sitting quietly among everything he feared so no one else would have to. Here is what I want you to consider. If you could walk into that office right now, knowing what each object does, what it costs, what it remembers, would you touch any of them? Not the obviously cursed ones. I mean the pensive, the portraits, the things that look safe. Tell me in the comments. I genuinely want to know. If you are not subscribed yet, now would be a good time. The next lesson will be about something most fans have seen hundreds of times and never actually noticed. Until then, stay curious. It suits you.